I was so used to being invisible, to feeling like a burden, that when I finally reached out for help, I didn't expect a response. But people showed up quietly at first, then all at once. They didn't fix me, but they stayed. And just when I started to believe I was worth holding onto, someone from my past tried to pull me back. I was so used to being invisible that I stopped expecting people to notice when I left a room. Teachers forgot to call on me. Friends made plans around me. At home, I learned to speak between moments, not during them. Like timing my voice wrong might make it echo too loud. Or worse, too sharp. I wasn't ignored in a cruel way. I was ignored in the way background noise is tolerated, sometimes acknowledged, never really heard. At school, I became the person people remembered only when they needed a note passed, a paper proofread, a seat filled. I smiled on cue, laughed at the right volume, blended into group photos just enough to be cropped out later without anyone noticing. In friendships, I became the listener, the secret keeper, the one who always asked, "Are you okay?" but never got the question back. Eventually, I stopped offering up stories, stopped suggesting plans, stopped assuming I was welcome. At family gatherings, they'd say things like, "You're so quiet," with a smile, like it was a compliment, like they hadn't spent years teaching me that loud meant trouble. I learned to walk through doors without making a sound, to sit without taking up space, to cry in the shower and call it self-care, to answer "I'm fine" before anyone even asked. I didn't feel lonely exactly. I just felt extra, like an accessory to other people's lives, like a placeholder someone forgot to replace. There's a kind of silence that comes from not being chosen, not for teams, not for dances, not for closeness. That silence doesn't scream, it just settles, layer by layer, until you mistake it for comfort. I got good at pretending, at smiling without warmth, at listening without absorbing, at carrying other people's weight without asking if I was allowed to put mine down. I told myself it wasn't personal. Maybe I was too quiet, maybe I didn't try hard enough, maybe I wasn't interesting, or easy, or necessary. Rooms got quiet when I spoke. Eyes looked past me. And eventually, I stopped expecting anything else. I learned early not to cry too loudly, not because anyone ever told me not to, but because of how fast the room would shift when I did. The way faces would stiffen, the way voices would drop, not in concern, in discomfort. I'd catch the sigh, the glance, the quiet tension of someone deciding whether to ask what was wrong or wait for me to swallow it, so I stopped crying where it could be seen. Tears became a private ritual, swallowed sobs in bathroom stalls, damp pillowcases flipped over before morning, showers that ran too long so no one could tell the difference between water and weakness. I wasn't taught that pain was forbidden. I was taught that mine was inconvenient, too messy, too much. If I got overwhelmed, someone always had a reason for why it wasn't that bad. A distraction, a joke, a reminder to toughen up. If I didn't bounce back fast enough, I got the look. That tired one people give when they think you're being difficult. So I learned to shrink. I measured every emotional response against the mood of the room. If someone else was having a hard time, mine didn't matter. If things were going well, I didn't want to ruin it. If someone was tired, I became invisible. If someone was angry, I became small. I kept track of how much space I took up, how often I asked for things, how long I spoke in conversations. Even when someone asked how I was doing, I'd answer based on what I thought they wanted to hear, not what I felt. If I said I was struggling, I made sure to say I was handling it. If I asked for help, I apologized first. If I cried, I wiped my face before they could see it. And the few times I let something show, a crack, a tremble, a slip of truth, the silence that followed taught me everything I needed to know. I wasn't allowed to be heavy. I was allowed to be helpful, supportive, quiet, easy. So I became all of those things, even when I was breaking. I never asked for help, not because I didn't need it, but because somewhere along the line, I stopped believing I was allowed to. The things I carried weren't loud. They didn't scream. They settled quietly, the way heavy things do when you don't move them. I got used to the weight. There were days I didn't eat. Not because there wasn't food, but because the thought of choosing something, making it, sitting down, felt like too many steps. Too many decisions. Too much for someone who didn't think she was worth the effort. There were nights I didn't sleep. My mind spun quietly, wrapping itself around old memories, unfinished conversations, invisible bruises I didn't know how to name. I stared at the ceiling until morning came. Then I got up, smiled at coworkers, answered emails, folded laundry, returned texts with exclamation marks. I became a master at function. I kept things neat, my desk, my hair, my language. I kept my voice measured, my stories short, my needs vague enough that no one could accuse me of asking too much. I answered, I'm fine, so often it stopped sounding like a lie. But the truth was, I was tired of holding everything, of pretending I wasn't, of being the person people leaned on while never knowing where to lean myself. I told myself I didn't need help, that I could handle it, that if I just kept going it would pass. The ache, the fog, the flatness. I thought maybe if I made myself small enough, quiet enough, useful enough, someone would notice. Someone would offer before I asked. Someone would see without me having to say anything. But no one did, because I taught them not to. I trained everyone around me to believe I was okay, that I was the strong one, the low-maintenance one, the one who never asked for much. So they didn't offer, and I didn't ask. And that silence, it became my language. It happened on a Tuesday, nothing dramatic, no breaking point. Just one of those long, stretched-out evenings where the quiet felt heavier than usual, like the walls were pressing in. I had gone the whole day without speaking to anyone, not a single text, not a call. I hadn't left the apartment. I hadn't eaten since breakfast, and even that had been half a granola bar. I wasn't sad, exactly, just numb, like my body had powered down to save what little was left. I stared at the lamp in the corner of my room, switched on but flickering slightly, and thought if I disappeared tomorrow, who would know? The question didn't scare me. It felt normal. That's when I picked up my phone, not out of hope. Not because I believed anyone would answer, but because the silence had started to ache in a way I couldn't sit with anymore. I opened the Messages app and hovered over a name. Not someone close, not someone I'd confided in before. Just a coworker, Jamie, who once brought me soup when I had a cold and didn't make a big deal out of it. I typed one line. Hey, I'm not doing great tonight. Then I stared at it for 20 minutes. My thumb hovered over send, then moved away, then back. My chest felt tight, but not like panic, more like shame. Why now? Why this? Why would anyone care? But my fingers hit send anyway, just one sentence. No context. No emojis. No punctuation beyond the period I debated deleting. Then I dropped the phone onto the bed like it burned. I didn't expect a reply. I expected more silence, because that's what I'd trained myself to live with. But this time, the silence didn't stay. The reply came less than a minute later. Do you want me to come over? 7 words, no small talk, no hesitation, no pretending not to understand what I meant. I stared at the screen like it was a trick, like maybe I had imagined it. My hands shook slightly, not from fear, from disbelief. I didn't answer right away. I didn't know how. No one had ever offered to show up before. Not without conditions. Not without making me feel like a burden, but Jamie didn't ask questions, didn't tell me to explain, didn't ask why I felt the way I did. Just offered. I typed back slowly. No, but thank you. I think I just needed someone to know. Seconds passed, then, I hear you. That was it, no advice, no redirect, just acknowledgement. It landed like a lifeline, not because it fixed anything, but because it made me feel like I wasn't floating in space anymore. I sat there, phone in hand, feeling something unfamiliar settle into my chest. Not joy, not even comfort, just presence. Like someone had reached across the dark and held on, and it didn't stop there. An hour later, another message came, from someone I hadn't talked to in months. Hey, I know it's late, but I've been thinking about you. How are you doing? I blinked and then another. Just checking in, no pressure to reply. And another, if you ever need to talk, I'm around, for real. I hadn't told anyone but Jamie. But somehow the universe, or luck, or timing, or something bigger than me cracked open that night. And in the quiet I'd lived in for so long, something else began to slip through. Kindness. Not loud, not forced, just there. They came quietly. A few texts at first, not all at once, not dramatic. Just little flashes of light in a place that had been dark for so long I forgot it wasn't supposed to be. A friend I hadn't seen since college reached out. "You crossed my mind today. Hope you're okay. Miss you." A coworker asked if I wanted to grab coffee after work. Not because she knew anything, just because she felt like catching up. Even a stranger online, someone I'd followed for years, but never spoken to, replied to a comment I left on a late-night post. If you ever need a soft landing, my inbox is open. None of them knew exactly what I was carrying. None of them asked me to explain. They just showed up, one by one, in small human ways. An extra sandwich on someone's lunch break, left on my desk without a note. A playlist link, a forwarded meme, a forwarded "this made me think of you." No one tried to diagnose me. No one told me to stay positive. No one gave me a list of steps to feel better. They just stayed. I didn't make it easy. I kept my replies short, my tone flat. I ghosted once or twice out of habit. But no one vanished in return. They didn't flood me with attention. They didn't expect me to perform progress. They let me come back in pieces. There were nights I didn't answer anyone. Mornings I stared at unread messages and thought, I can't today. And somehow that was okay. Because when I did respond, late, awkwardly, unevenly, they were still there. And every time I thought, this is probably the last time they'll check in, someone proved me wrong. They weren't trying to save me. They weren't trying to fix me. They were just showing up. And that, somehow, was more powerful than any rescue. No one tried to fix me. They didn't ask what started it, how long it had been, or what I planned to do next. They didn't offer quotes or strategies or self-help links. They didn't treat me like a problem to be solved. They just stayed. Jamie brought over soup one evening without asking. She knocked once, handed me the container, and said, "You don't have to talk, just eat something warm." Then she left. Another friend, Mariah, started texting me every few days. Not with questions, just with pieces of her day. Accidentally bought decaf. Feel personally attacked. The sky's weirdly pink tonight. Thought of you. Made lasagna. Burned half, still proud. No pressure to reply. Just connection offered like a hand resting nearby, palm up, waiting. And when I did speak, when I let a little more through, they didn't tense up. They didn't flinch when I said, "I feel like I don't matter most days." They didn't try to fix it. Jamie just said, "I know that feeling, doesn't make it true." Mariah typed, "You do, but you don't have to believe that right now." Well, believe it for you. There was something sacred in that, being allowed to be broken without being rushed toward repair. They didn't praise me for small wins. They didn't guilt me for low days. They didn't tell me what to do. They just kept showing up. A text, a knock, a moment. They sat beside my silence without needing to fill it. They let the heaviness sit in the room without trying to air it out. They didn't walk away when my answers got short, when my voice cracked, when I pulled back. They just stayed. And for the first time, I realized how rare that was, to not be someone's project, to not owe someone my healing as payment for their care, to be allowed to exist, messy, uncertain, quiet, and still be worth the effort. I started to breathe again. Not deeply, not in that dramatic, life-changing movie scene kind of way. Just enough. Enough to get through the mornings without sitting on the edge of my bed for 20 minutes. Enough to answer a message without rehearsing it 5 times. Enough to walk through a store without feeling like everyone was watching me unravel. It wasn't relief. Not yet, it was just air, making its way back into places I'd tightened for too long. Jamie noticed it first. "You're standing straighter," she said one afternoon, handing me a coffee like it was nothing. I hadn't realized I'd stopped curling in. I hadn't realized I'd been bracing always. I started opening my windows more, just a crack, just enough to let sound in. Street noise, a neighbor's music, wind. Evidence that life was happening outside of my head. I started saying yes to small things, a walk, a shared lunch break, a phone call I didn't let go to voicemail. I still froze sometimes. Still panicked when someone got too close too fast. Still had moments where my body felt like a stranger, but I wasn't pretending anymore. I wasn't smiling to survive. I was just there, present, inside my own skin, trying. The people around me noticed, but they didn't name it. They didn't applaud. They didn't make it a thing. They let me have it. They let me breathe, at my pace, on my terms. There was power in that, not being rushed, not being praised, not being pushed toward better. Just being allowed to be. And in that quiet, unremarkable space, the kind I used to shrink inside, I started to take up room again. I was still broken, but I wasn't alone. And somehow, that made all the difference. There were days I still woke up with a heaviness in my chest, nights I still stared at the ceiling too long. Triggers that caught me off guard, a song, a smell, a phrase said in the wrong tone. But when I unraveled now, I wasn't unraveling in silence. Jamie sat with me on the floor once while I cried. She didn't ask what it was about, didn't tell me to breathe or try to make it better. She just sat, her back against the wall, her eyes steady, a presence, not a solution. Mariah sent me a voice note one evening, just her singing softly, not for show. Just something she said helped her when things felt heavy. I played it twice. Then again. Another friend, Leela, from an online forum, started sending daily check-ins. Not to ask how I was, but to tell me something good. I tried the lemon cake, it was terrible, but I smiled. A dog ran up to me in the park and licked my knee. I let it happen. It wasn't therapy, it wasn't recovery. It was connection. There were shared silences that didn't feel like absence. There were moments I cried in front of people and didn't feel ashamed. There were bursts of laughter that came out of nowhere, not forced, not for anyone else's comfort. Just there. Real. And for the first time, I stopped seeing broken as a reason to hide. I wasn't a project. I wasn't falling apart in ways that made me unlovable. I was human. Held together, gently, by people who didn't require me to be healed to be worthy. We didn't talk about getting better every day. We talked about what we made for dinner. What time we went to bed. What little thing made the day bearable? It wasn't dramatic, it was steady. And in that steady, I found something I hadn't felt in a long time. Belonging. I began to believe I was worth holding onto. Not because I got stronger. Not because I got funnier or easier to be around or more myself. But because, slowly, the people around me kept choosing to stay, even when I didn't know what I was offering in return. They didn't love me for what I did. They didn't stick around because I performed wellness better. They didn't reward progress or withdraw during backslides. They just kept showing up. And with every silent meal we shared, every text they answered without delay, every moment someone said, "Take your time, I'm here," something inside me shifted. Not all at once, not like flipping a switch, but enough to start questioning the story I had always believed. That I was too much, that I was hard to love, that I had to earn care. I remember sitting on the couch one afternoon, a blanket across my lap, watching a show I used to fake interest in just to have something to talk about with people who barely noticed me. But this time, I was watching because I liked it. And halfway through the episode, I realized I wasn't watching to fill the silence anymore. I wasn't trying to disappear into the background. I wasn't performing calm. I was calm. I wasn't waiting to be abandoned. And I wasn't testing the people around me to prove they'd go. For the first time, I wasn't afraid of being seen because the people who saw me didn't treat my flaws like a liability. I was starting to believe I didn't have to be perfect to be held. I didn't have to shrink to be safe. I didn't have to hide to be allowed. I wasn't all the way there yet, but I was on the edge of something softer. And for the first time in years, maybe ever, I didn't flinch at the thought that someone might really want to stay. I made room for joy again, not in big, sweeping gestures, not in loud declarations or overcorrected happiness, just in small, deliberate moments that felt like mine. I started cooking again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to taste something warm that I made with my own hands. I played music while chopping vegetables, soft enough to hum along to without thinking. I sent the first text once, just a thinking of you to someone who'd been doing the same for me for months. No panic afterward. No spiral about whether I was being needy. I wore a shirt I used to love, one I had buried in the back of my closet during the hardest weeks. I didn't even realize what I was doing until I caught my reflection and saw a version of myself I hadn't looked for in a long time. I started opening my curtains earlier in the day. Started lighting candles even when no one was coming over. Started answering the phone when it rang instead of waiting for it to stop. I let people see me laugh. And I let it happen more than once. Not because the pain had vanished, but because I stopped holding it like a secret. I stopped making it my whole personality. I let it sit where it belonged, real, valid, but not everything. I let joy live beside it. There were still moments where the dark returned, where the weight settled back in. But the difference now was that it didn't stay alone. There were other feelings in the room, too. Lighter ones, louder ones, not every day. But enough. Enough to prove to myself that I was capable of more than endurance, that I could feel something good and not question whether I deserved it, that I could smile without needing to explain it. That joy didn't have to be earned. Sometimes it could just be chosen. I didn't expect to be happy. I thought maybe I'd feel stable, functional, better in the quiet way people say when they don't want to jinx it. I thought I'd settle into something manageable, something neutral. But one afternoon, walking home from the store with a bag of groceries in one hand and my phone playing music in the other, I caught myself smiling. Not at anyone. Not for anyone, just smiling. And I didn't flinch, I didn't check myself. I didn't brace for something bad to follow, I just let it be. It wasn't a perfect day. I still forgot 3 things on my list. I still hesitated before answering a text. I still moved a little too fast past the mirror when I got home. But I was happy, not euphoric, not floating, just grounded in something good, something gentle. The kind of happiness that sneaks up on you, that doesn't make an entrance. That just exists. I put the groceries away with the windows open. Let the wind mess up the papers on my counter. Let myself hum a song I hadn't heard in years. I sat down with my tea and didn't reach for my phone. Didn't fill the silence. Didn't need to. Because in that moment, nothing was wrong, nothing was missing, I was okay. Not performing okay, not pretending okay, just okay. And when the wave of doubt started to creep in, the old reflex to scan for what might ruin it, I didn't let it settle. I didn't push the joy away to make room for fear. I stayed in it. Because for the first time in a long time, I wasn't waiting for the sky to fall. I was just sitting in the sun. It started with a notification. A name I hadn't seen in over 2 years. A name I'd blocked, deleted, buried. And yet, there it was, bold on my screen, a new message request. From someone I never thought I'd hear from again. I didn't open it right away. I stared at it like it was a memory trying to claw its way back into the room. Like if I blinked too hard, it might disappear. It didn't. The name sat there, still, heavy, familiar in the worst way. I didn't need to open the message to know the tone. I could already hear it, that gentle phrasing used to cover sharp things. The way they always knew how to lace sweetness into words that made me second-guess myself. It took everything in me not to throw my phone across the room. Not because I was angry, but because I was afraid of what that message could unlock if I let it. I thought I'd closed that door for good, and I had. But sometimes the past doesn't knock. Sometimes it just finds a window. For the rest of the day, I moved slower. Not because I was sad, because I was calculating. What if I opened it? What if I answered? What if part of me still wanted to? That was the part I hated most, the flicker of curiosity. The part that remembered how things used to feel before they turned. The part that wondered if maybe they were different now. And underneath that flicker was another layer. Shame, because I knew better, and I still hesitated. The message stayed unopened. But it was already speaking. Without a word read, it had already shifted something in me, and I had to decide not what to say, but who I was now that they'd found their way back in. They asked to talk, said they'd been thinking about me, that they'd changed, that they missed the connection we had, the kind you don't find twice. The message was soft, measured, like it had been written, deleted, rewritten 3 times before hitting send. Like they knew exactly which version of me they were aiming for. They didn't mention what happened. They didn't say the words. No apology, just nostalgia. A gentle tug at shared memories. A reminder of inside jokes, old photos, how we used to be. They said they were in a better place now. That they'd done the work, that they finally understood. It read like a script. Like something written for someone who hadn't already crawled out from under the weight of their silence. Someone still hoping they'd come back. Someone who hadn't already buried that chapter and walked out the other side. They tried to keep it open-ended. If you don't want to talk, I understand. No pressure. I just wanted to say it. But the message still pulled. Not because I believed it, but because I remembered who I used to be when I did. The girl who made excuses for coldness. The one who twisted herself to fit moods that changed without warning. The one who called it deep when it was just emotionally unpredictable. I used to live off crumbs. So even a line like, "I never stopped caring," used to feel like a feast. But I wasn't starving anymore. I read the message again, then once more slower. Each word was shaped like warmth, but it wasn't real, it was bait. Wrapped in memory, dressed as healing. But underneath it, I saw the pattern. And I knew if I answered, I wouldn't just be talking to them. I'd be dragging the version of me who believed them back into the room. I froze. Phone in hand, heart steady but unsettled. The kind of stillness that doesn't come from peace but calculation. I wasn't spiraling. I wasn't crying. I was suspended, caught between what I used to feel and what I've learned to know. Part of me wanted to answer, not to reopen anything, just to be kind, just to prove I wasn't bitter, just to say, "I'm glad you're doing better," and move on. But I knew that voice. The one inside me that used to call silence unkind. That mistook boundaries for cruelty. That twisted guilt into obligation and forgiveness into submission. That voice had kept me in rooms too long, had kept me chasing apologies dressed as affection, had told me that staying quiet meant I was just as bad as them, that ignoring someone's growth was a form of harm. But the truth was clearer now. Responding would be an opening, not a conversation, a doorway, and I wasn't that girl anymore. I wasn't someone who needed their recognition to feel seen. I wasn't someone who mistook their confusion for care, but it still tugged. Because healing doesn't erase old wiring. It just teaches you not to plug yourself into the same dead sockets. I stared at the message like it was a test I didn't study for, and in a way, it was a test of memory, a test of value, a test of how many times I needed to be burned before I believed the flame didn't care who I used to be. My thumb hovered, and the war started. The part of me that remembered the hurt, steady. The part of me that remembered the intimacy, louder. And the part of me I'd built piece by piece over the past year, waiting, watching. Not saying no, not saying yes. Just holding the line, I told someone. Not out of panic, out of instinct. The moment I felt the pull, I knew I couldn't navigate it alone. Not because I wasn't strong enough. Because I didn't want to do it the way I used to, silently, secretly, shrinking in the dark. So I messaged Jamie, just one line, they reached out. A minute later, want to talk about it. I hesitated, then yes. She called instead of texting. No small talk, no tone of surprise, just space. "I'm here," she said. I told her everything. Read the message out loud. Told her how it sounded so measured, so reasonable, so familiar. I told her about the pause it created in me. The tug. I waited for judgment. It never came. "I get it," she replied. "That kind of history, it doesn't disappear just because you know better." There was no warning in her voice. No lecture. No rush to declare the person toxic or to burn it all down, just understanding. Clean and clear. "You're allowed to feel it," she added. "You're just not required to follow it." I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Then Mariah messaged me as if she knew. "Hey, just checking in, nothing specific. Just felt like I should." I told her too, her response. "Whatever you need to feel it. Just don't forget who you are now." And I didn't, because this time I had mirrors. People who reflected back my strength when I couldn't see it. People who didn't twist my uncertainty into failure. People who knew my past didn't define my choices, but could absolutely haunt them. They didn't push me to block the message or respond. They just stayed with me in the space between. And that space, full of honesty, safety, and steady voices, was where I found the answer I was looking for. I wrote a response. I didn't mean to. It just started forming in my head while I washed dishes, then followed me to the couch, then onto the Notes app. A quiet draft, calm, honest, measured. "Thank you for reaching out. I'm glad you're doing better. I've done a lot of work too, and where I am now doesn't include revisiting that part of my life. I wish you well, but I need to protect the peace I've built." I read it twice, then again, it was kind, direct, final. I told myself it would close the loop, that it was mature to respond. That silence could be misread, but something felt off, not in the words, in the need to send them, because under the surface I wasn't writing for them. I was writing to manage their perception of me, to stay palatable, gracious, good, to make sure they couldn't say I was cold, or cruel, or petty. Even now, even after everything, part of me still wanted to leave things nice. And that realization hit harder than the message itself. I didn't owe a graceful exit. Not to someone who only returned when it was convenient. Not to someone who vanished when I needed them most. Not to someone who helped shape the silence I had to rebuild myself inside. So I sat with the draft, then I closed it, deleted it, not out of fear, not out of indecision, out of certainty. They didn't get access to this version of me, not even for closure, especially not for closure, because what they were asking for wasn't clarity. It was a hand on the doorknob, and I wasn't opening that door even to say goodbye. I didn't go back. The message stayed unread. The name stayed muted. The door stayed closed. And for the first time, it didn't feel like a fight. It felt like a choice. A quiet, steady, full-body no that didn't need to shout to be heard. I knew what waited there. The pull, the old patterns. The way I used to bend until my spine forgot what standing straight felt like. They said they'd changed. Maybe they had, but this wasn't about who they were now. It was about who I wasn't anymore. I wasn't the girl who mistook longing for love, who called tension chemistry, who edited herself to be easier to keep. I wasn't someone who found comfort in familiar pain just because it knew her name. I had spent too long stitching myself back together to rip the seam for a memory. It wasn't anger that kept me away. It wasn't pride. It was peace. Clean, earned, mine, and I wasn't trading it for nostalgia. I went for a walk that evening. Left my phone at home. Let the air hit my skin without rushing to label the moment as progress. I didn't need it to mean anything. I just needed it to be mine. No one had to know what I chose. There was no announcement. No social post. No declaration. Just silence, this time on my terms. I didn't explain myself. I didn't apologize. I didn't look back. Because walking away isn't always dramatic. Sometimes it's just the refusal to return. I chose myself again, not in some loud, triumphant way. There was no music swelling in the background, no mirror pep talk, no text sent to a friend saying I did it. I just woke up the next morning and felt steady. I made coffee, took a longer shower than usual, sat by the window while the city moved outside. And for the first time in days, I didn't check my phone first. There was no ache in my chest, no tension behind my eyes, no unfinished conversation playing on a loop. Just a quiet, unmistakable feeling I'd done the right thing. It wasn't just that I didn't go back. It was that I didn't want to anymore. There was no longer a part of me waiting to be convinced. No imaginary version of them I needed to keep alive. No narrative to fix. No redemption arc to complete. They were part of my story, but not this chapter. I folded laundry, watered the plants, called Jamie and told her what I didn't do. She didn't cheer. She didn't say, "Proud of you." She just said, "Of course you didn't." And that was the best part. It wasn't a surprise anymore when I chose peace. It was expected. I looked around my apartment that afternoon and noticed things I hadn't in weeks. The book I left open, the candle burned down low, the hoodie draped over the chair from a night in with friends. This was my life, small, simple, rooted, and entirely mine. Choosing myself didn't feel like power. It felt like home. I'm not invisible anymore. I walk into rooms now with my head up, not because I'm trying to be seen, but because I no longer expect to disappear. People look at me, and they see me, not for what I can do for them, not for how easy I am to be around, not for how well I hold their secrets, but for who I am, whole, flawed, healing. I used to think love had to be earned. Now I know the kind that matters doesn't make you beg. The ones around me now, they don't flinch when I'm quiet. They don't praise me only when I'm light. They hold space when I'm heavy. They sit in silence without asking it to move. And me, I speak more. I say no without wrapping it in 100 soft explanations. I take up space, physically, emotionally, in conversations. I trust myself more than I ever trusted their approval. So when someone from my past tried to pull me back, they didn't find the version they remembered. They didn't find the girl who folded to fit them. She's gone. And what's left is someone I fought to become. Someone held by love I never thought I deserved. The kind that doesn't leave when I'm messy. The kind that never asked me to be smaller. The kind I built person by person, day by day, after realizing I didn't need to be fixed to be worthy. just held, and finally I am no longer unseen, no longer a burden, no longer returning to people who taught me to vanish. I'm still here, and I'm not going back. Thank you for watching. Please do not forget to like, comment, share, and subscribe. I love you all.